had a good lunch, I hope, and now you're going into the world of trucks, which is always an exciting adventure. So just really a bit about trucks. I don't know what everyone knows here, but about 85% of everything that's delivered to everybody would have been on a truck. As 1 in 3 are a DAF, there's a pretty good chance I've delivered something to everyone here at some point. You rely on my network, which has the best uptime of any network, and you rely on our logistics part support, which is probably even better than Amazon, to be honest, in terms of keeping trucks on the road. You don't want Tesco's phoning me up late at night to say, truck's broken down, we can't fill our supermarket, you now need to pay me all the money. So a lot of pressure in the truck world, as you can appreciate. But I think it's valid to put those things out there, because what I've heard today, a lot of those things do affect the truck world, but we're about probably 5 years behind in terms of where we see things. And part of that is because there's no clear path on the technology that we need to pick. As also has been said before, if you need to put a lot of capital investment in and you're backing a lot of different horses, that becomes very difficult and very challenging. So I've just started with this slide, which is zero emission solutions. And really, the slide is to demonstrate the number of applications that are in the truck. It's not like a car. I know you can obviously get small hatch, large hatch, etc. These trucks do different things, whether it's road sweeping, tippers, whether it's box vans, whether it's tractors, whether it's trunking, whether it's drawbars. You will see here that pretty much there's a different application and a different vehicle for each application type. Now, roughly, there's only in the past sort of 5 years, the average market size in the UK has been about 40,000 trucks. So when you think of that in terms of economies of scale, that doesn't give you a big economies of scale to really change that infrastructure of trucks quickly. You add on to that, and here you can see the bottom left where we're sort of urban trucks, and as you move to the right, it's obviously the weight of the truck, which obviously for EV becomes challenging, and as you move up to the top right, you can also see the distance becomes greater in terms of the tractors, which is also a challenge. So obviously weight and distance become the big issues for us. So how do we see that in terms of the truck world? I think it's pretty clear. We're all trying to do all of us in this manufacturing industry, we're focused on these things. Global warming, and we're looking at local air quality. In terms of global warming, there we're looking at the national, the way the vehicles transport nationally. So is that a one trip, 250 kilometres? Is it a 2 to 3 day trip? Or of course, some of these trucks go away for 1 or 2 weeks at a time. So how do we reduce the amount of fuel they burn? Because obviously the amount of fuel you burn reduces the CO2. That is still a primary goal of all the truck manufacturers, reducing that CO2, reducing or improving fuel efficiency. Obviously, then we have urban, and urban is local air quality. So obviously, particular NOx is vital to that. And there you can see here we have a vocational. So we're looking into the suburbs, the city centres, and the local. That area is really the first part that the truck manufacturers are trying to hit and trying to achieve some success in. And the reason for that is on the previous slide, you would see that those vehicles give us the opportunity to back-to-base charging. Because without an infrastructure, because there isn't an electric infrastructure to recharge trucks, we've got to rely on getting that truck back to base. Yeah, it needs to charge there. Whole host of issues there with National Grid, and can they get to the site, and is there enough capacity there, and who's going to pay for it, who's the new person that trips you over the limit for the site, etc. But that's the world we're now entering in terms of trying to sell a truck. I'm now becoming an expert in the National Grid. So, urban. Regional vocational, as I said, it's definitely battery electric trucks. The focus is on air quality, congestion, and obviously vehicle road user safety. Safety is obviously paramount in terms of the truck world. What we're then starting to obviously talk about is depot-based charging. So is that feasible to some of the customers that want those trucks, and what do we need to do that? City zero emission zones obviously put a pressure on that we need to have vehicles that are able to deliver. I know everyone thinks they don't want trucks in the cities, but then there wouldn't be any goods in the cities and no one could get their Costa in the morning. So I'm sure there'll be a big outcry. So we do need these electric trucks being able to go into the city. The other thing which really isn't really shared at the moment is shared use consolidation centres. So are we really utilising the space on trucks? If we want to do something about congestion, you need to make sure that all trucks are being loaded to capacity and being utilised as such. The other things obviously this does in terms of urban is opportunity charging enables battery downsizing, because obviously the size of the battery has a big impact in terms of weight for the vehicle, but also the cost of that battery, and you shouldn't forget that we are a business to business. People who buy trucks earn money from that truck. They don't like downtime and they want to maximise what they can carry. So this is the challenge when you start to go battery and you go up the weights. Obviously wireless charging and local service support. Touched on earlier about the skill sets you need, obviously critical. How do you work when a truck's broken down? As a brief antidote in terms of that, we had our first truck on the road and we realised if it broke down, we didn't have anybody who could work on it. So then we had to create a course to enable someone to go there and effectively detach the electric, because these things are dangerous. They would kill you if you don't know what you're doing, with obviously the charge in the vehicle. So straight away we were into a different training, skill set, and we're still working through that now. In terms of early adopters, so these are the type of companies that we see doing that. Environmental champions, you know, businesses that really want to have that green ticket on their annual report. Municipal, urban distribution, obviously those are key areas for us. And supermarkets and retailers, where fast charging, maybe with quick drops, works. Predominantly though, it's back to base recharging is where we see it. And this is the challenge for us in terms of when we challenge the government, is we are saying you're looking at the truck market in terms of under 26 tonnes, over 26 tonnes, 2035, 2040, but actually it's the segments you should look at. Why aren't you picking road sweepers? Why aren't all road sweepers electric? They could all be electric. Why don't you pick bin wagons? Bin wagons could be electric. That's over 26 tonnes. Rather than give a weight that doesn't really make much sense. So we're lucky enough of Leyland Trucks, I don't know if you know, but Leyland Trucks is where DAFs are built. So up in Preston, we're lucky to have the factory there. And we won an Innovate award for running 20 trucks with the NHS. And that was to really look at charging infrastructure and how those vehicles run and operate. Interestingly, we delivered them all late, I think. And that was all to do with the locations couldn't get the chargers on site. So we built the trucks, but we couldn't get the chargers on site because there was a delay in building electric chargers. Don't know if you've all experienced that. So that was one of our big challenges. It delayed us by 3 months. So great plans and all that. But anyway, we've got there in the end. But that whole industry of electric chargers is a challenge. Equally, if one of these vehicle breaks, we have not got any spare parts for that vehicle currently. So that's how we are on the front of technology, pushing the boundaries there, which is a challenge. So I've now switched back to this slide because I think this is an important point, is we all focus on electric, and I think that's great in terms of the car manufacturers and for us on the lower market. But actually, for the truck market, as I said earlier, we need to reduce CO2. So one of the ways we're doing that is the EU and UK came up with Vecto, which was a carbon saving tool, which basically meant by 2025, so let's go back just in case you don't know, 2020, the manufacturer produced a number of vehicles, and it was measured what CO2 it produced in those vehicles. What we then did is you skip forward to 2025, and they're benchmarking us to say the vehicles you're producing today are 15% more efficient than 2020, and by 2030, 30% more efficient. Now, that is a hell of a challenge because the previous years, from about 2000 to 2020, the improvement that pretty much all manufacturers did was about 20%, so 1% a year. CO2 improvement. Now we've got to do 15% in 5 and then another 15% in another 5. Having said that, is to reduce CO2, so something I think we all agree should be done. One of the things we as DAF did, we took advantage of new masses and dimensions, which is actually, believe it or not, that truck is aerodynamic. I don't know if you can tell. It's a 23% gradient, but that 23% gradient with some driveline changes gave a 10% improvement in fuel. Which is massive in terms of truck for those who know that those bills can run into the hundreds of thousands or millions in terms of diesel bills. So that is something where we've looked at the legislation to produce an improvement. Obviously, all of manufacturers looking at more efficient drive lines, looking at tyres with lower rolling resistance, and further driver support systems. So, you know, can we automate, and it's not fully automational, but part of the way along the automation, some of the driver's experiences to ensure the vehicle is running as efficiently as possible. Obviously, one of the big things there we're talking to many people about is HVO in terms of an alternative fuel, which is gaining some traction now that the availability is starting to increase slightly more. The other element in terms of DAF, we won in Innovation, International Truck of the Year Innovation for 2022, which is for a combustion engine running on hydrogen as a fuel, which obviously doesn't mean the combustion engine is dead necessarily, if we can say that the hydrogen could go in. It does still create some tailpipe gases, but minimal, and we haven't quite worked on how to reduce that yet. But gives you an idea maybe what's possible in terms of trucks. Maybe electric doesn't need to be all the way up the weight range. I just put this slide on, so largest fuel economy improvement. This was really to demonstrate all the euros, and you've heard that people talk about every euro created a benefit in terms of CO2, and the last change for us, you could see that's quite a drastic change in terms of the new truck because of the aerodynamics. And well on our way to reach the 15% by 2025. Which is actually, as a manufacturer, our biggest goal at the moment. So battery electric is important, but we need to reduce CO2, otherwise there's fines that would hit manufacturers in terms of not achieving that 15% by 2025. That's also then an issue when you think of government who are saying, you need to work on this or we need to work on that. Currently, we're trying to work on electric, we're trying to work on combustion engines, as you heard the Cummins guy earlier say. So working on combustion, electric, hydrogen as a fuel, hydrogen fuel cell, depending on the applications. So clarity of what should we be working on is really a key for the truck industry. On long distance, I mean, this is fairly obvious, I think, because this is a bigger issue for us. So clearly you focus on transport efficiency, which is the Vecto, the most efficient vehicle. The challenge here is you can't go back to base charging. So there it really is, well, what is going to happen with a recharging infrastructure? In my world, there's only two people probably with the money enough to put that infrastructure in. One's the government, maybe one's the fuel companies, if they were going to put hydrogen stations or something else in. Whether they will or whether they won't is anyone's guess. Public recharging infrastructure, so obviously you've got the strategic road network where you've seen different activities, so whether it's rapid charging facilities, whether it's electric road systems, or obviously hydrogen refueling stations. But these are different types of technologies which require the manufacturer to build the truck slightly differently. So that, again, is a challenge for truck manufacturers. So other considerations, I'm going to put this on driver welfare. Through COVID, I think everyone was suddenly aware of truck drivers and the conditions they have and why they're needed. And that if we're talking about attracting people to an industry, then you need to make sure that we have people who want to come to the industry and the facilities are as they would expect. Equally, as we move, what happens to the funding model in road user charging? And the other big one we see is we have a factory in Leyland, a factory in Eindhoven. If the rules deviate, how do we compete? I mean, London created that problem for us slightly with Direct Vision, because then we were telling Eindhoven, Europe, you need to build a truck for Direct Vision, but it's just one city, but it might be other cities. And that means you need a consistent approach from government, just across the UK, but also Europe in some of these areas. Otherwise, it will become disparate and just too difficult. So in summary, I think, yep, after lunch, making sure I'm on time. In summary, so low carbon fuels, obviously that still has to be the way forward. Fuel efficiency and drive carbon savings. That is what we're focusing on for definitely the short term now. We obviously look at drop-in fuels like HVO, which is favoured, and that the other benefit to that, you can use that in your existing fleet. Euro 5, Euro 6 vehicles can use that today. So straight away, you improve your CO2. Obviously, Vecto is a key one. So when we're selling trucks now, we have Vecto scores, which identifies how we would spec a vehicle to you. Battery electric trucks, I think it's clear that's urban freight transport, back to base recharging, and the air quality is the key benefits there. It's more of a known, but obviously the infrastructure in those cities, into those back to base, needs to be more equitable. So people who are paying to upgrade aren't the people that pay the most money because it takes it over some allowance for that industrial estate, etc. And national long distance transport, infrastructure is key. You know, public or private access to zero carbon electricity, is that possible? And obviously you need those sort of things to support the battery electrics, electric road system, or hydrogen, whatever you're going to choose. And so that was the end of my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Laurence, very much indeed. Now, time is reasonably short, but perhaps if somebody has got an urgent question, we could take one quick one. But if hands aren't leaping up, then we may just thank Laurence.
I might have covered the bases.
I think Are we all trucked out?
Yeah, we're all trucked out, yeah.
And that was really interesting. Thank you so much.